All right, hello and welcome. Every once in a while, something particularly interesting in the climate space catches my eye, and this time I wanted to share it with you. A few weeks ago, I opened up my LinkedIn feed, which is usually where I'm getting good information about what people are talking about in the climate space, and I saw somebody post this presentation from an organization called Time for Better, which I had not heard of, but the title of the presentation intrigued me, and it is Communicating Climate Change in a Conservative Era. Now, if you've been following me, you know that I don't typically talk about convincing people that climate change is real, because there is over 70% of the population that already knows that it's real. I think that the better use of energy is to help activate those people who are already on board and maybe don't know how to take action, or they feel too much despair that it is difficult to really do anything about it, because despair is a real thing. I scrolled through this presentation and it had some very interesting insights, and I thought this would be a cool thing for us to go through together. By the way, I don't know Time for Better. They say that they're a climate communication and consulting agency. That's pretty much all I know. Maybe I'll get to talk to them about this work in a future video. By the way, I think it's important to note that just because people are conservative doesn't mean they don't believe in climate change or don't know that it's human caused. I think, we've all been led to believe that it's very black and white thinking over here, but people are very nuanced. And as I said, over 70% of people, according to Gale's studies, know that climate change is happening. Of course, that's going to cover people on the conservative side as well. And I looked up some quick stats. Last year, UChicago posted some new numbers from their polling. Through this polling, they're seeing that across the board, we've seen more people sort of wake up and understand that climate change is happening. In addition, those who have experienced extreme climate events themselves tend to have quite a huge increase in their understanding that climate change is happening and that's caused by humans by a pretty wide margin, which is very interesting to see. Last week was San Francisco Climate Week, and I attended an event about making polluters pay, which, by the way, is something that a lot of people can get behind regardless of their political standing. Making polluters pay is universally desired by people, which was a very interesting takeaway from that meeting. They also had this new organization there called Extreme Weather Survivors that I thought was super interesting. It's a coalition of people who have experienced extreme weather, getting their stories heard and told, and they were saying they even get placements on conservative news outlets like Fox News, because people just sharing their stories about how they're experiencing extreme weather, their houses getting swept away, that is something that reaches people on a human level outside of the political spectrum. They don't even have to talk about climate change. That to me made a lot of sense. You don't have to be an environmentalist or to be a vegan to understand that, we don't want people to have their houses destroyed. And as you see through this polling, people who unfortunately do experience those extreme weather events may come around to starting to see that those changes that they're seeing on a local level are connected to this global issue of climate change. So shout out to Extreme Weather Survivors. I think that's a really great idea to bring people together and help people share their stories. By the way, this, I'm kind of new to YouTube, so if you find any of what I say today interesting, stay along with us, help support the platform if you can, and I hope to make more videos like this. And without further ado, let's go into the presentation. Okay, channeling John Oliver here. I'm going to look down because that's where my laptop is. Communicating Climate Change in a Conservative Era by Time for Better. It's time for a fresh climate communication game plan. I agree with that. I don't think what we've been doing has really been working. Right now, of course, we're in a conservative era. Personally, as someone who has written grant proposals during the first Trump administration, there are language pivots and things you can do. There's benefits to, for instance, clean technology development that are bipartisan, that do cross party lines, that do strengthen America and do all the other things that anyone typically would want to do. And it's interesting to note here, as we talked about, Republicans are also concerned about climate change. It says 52%, which is not nothing. I mean, it's not 90%, but it is certainly not nothing. Republicans are concerned about climate, but they're not making it a priority. But what's interesting here is they say that they do respond strongly to things like extreme weather. We talked about that. Economic growth, resilience, national security. Absolutely. Even the military has been, up until now, focused on climate change as a threat to our national security, because a country that is less resilient to things like climate change is going to be more vulnerable to outside attacks, of course. All right. So use inclusive language that crosses the aisle to build trust and resonate with those values. I agree with this. I mean, I am a big fan of meeting people where they are. And, sometimes that means they're not just deciding that they're not going to budge. And so it's maybe not a good use of your time. But again, I think a lot of our values are the same. And avoiding language that can sometimes trigger people to believe a certain way can cause them to be defensive or run away before you even have a chance to connect on what you actually do have in common. So yeah, I think, unfortunately, some of these words that they're saying can be exclusive are things that I find very important. And for people who work in the climate crisis, they are important parts of what we do. And in capitalism, talking about the climate crisis as a crisis. And they're saying here, okay, that it's exclusive, that people maybe are turned off by that. So let's look at some of this inclusive language. Clean water, clean air. Absolutely. Who doesn't want that? Risk management. It's kind of a businessy term. Reducing dependency. Yeah, foreign oil, I think, is something people are responsive to, like energy independence, energy security. Those are, resonant with things that I have, had to kind of change language to in grant proposals that I worked on. Upgrading, affordability, yes. Who doesn't want that? Okay, surprisingly, carbon emissions actually does resonate according to them. I would have been surprised that I would have thought that wouldn't really resonate, talking about carbon. But yeah, I think overall, nobody wants to have more pollution in their communities, right? That's maybe why the polluters pay message comes across well. Okay, reframing. Okay, so now they're proposing that we reframe messaging to inclusive language, building off of the last slide. What I see here on the exclusive versus inclusive is, I actually would argue that I use a lot of this inclusive language already, and it's because I just do think that exclusive language, according to what they're saying, is usually not helpful. Like, it's doomerist, it's despair, it causes despair, it makes people feel less empowered. And yeah, I think it's more important to talk about job creation. I think it's more important to talk about safety. It's more important to talk about reducing threat from things like wildfires and extreme weather. And that there's an opportunity to become stronger, to become better, for us to be technologically advanced. Those things that make people feel proud of and are more hopeful and more opportunity-based than sort of scarcity-based, or things that can feel very fearful, because climate change is can be a very scary thing. But I think a lot of people don't want to feel like they are being told to be fearful. And yes, of course, like, who doesn't want healthy forests and rivers, places to protect that, those who like fishing, those who like, unfortunately, even hunting, people like hiking. Like, you want a nice place to hike, you want a nice place to fish. And this last one's interesting, about the flip side of dismantling capitalism being fresh air, clean water. I feel like that's not sort of like different sides of, I feel like those two things aren't really related. Yes, people are not down for dismantling capitalism. So I think a lot of people are afraid to be like, that feels like radical language. So I'm guessing they're just saying, let's use language that maybe feels less radical for a less radical audience. Okay, so what I actually think was interesting is they set out to make different archetypes, like different straw men for each type of conservative, and how do you message to each? I think this is the most interesting part of this presentation. The first thing that they talk about is this weirding weather, just extreme weather happening. What they're saying is that this kind of archetype values resilience, adaptation, recovery, and I would imagine independence too. And they're saying this archetype also has seen the worsening climate locally where they are. Disasters like this will only get worse with the climate crisis versus let's make sure everything is upgraded so we can be resilient. Instead of talking about banning fossil fuel extraction, let's strengthen our grid and diversify energy. Absolutely. Resilience was something that I have seen resonate in audiences that aren't necessarily like climate change focused. Again, like if you can have a local grid, if you can make energy at home, you don't need to import foreign fossil fuels. So imagine, you have a natural disaster happen. Even just having like a little solar powered radio is energy resilience, and that's just good to have on hand and anytime. All right, the last thing being about climate justice. Yeah, we want to protect frontline communities, and I think the justice language maybe is what they're saying is maybe won't resonate with some folks, but yeah, I agree. Like what we're basically saying is that we want to make sure that frontline communities, families, people who are living in areas where there might be environmental disaster will be able to recover quickly. Okay, secondly, this is actually what got me interested in this presentation in the first place, which is the trad wife aesthetic. So yeah, people who are into homemaking, self-sufficiency and tradition, engaged in personal sustainable practices already, making their own cheese at home, and want to preserve sort of traditional family values. Yeah, this is interesting. And I see there's like some little headlines here as an example of things that this type of archetype will be talking about that are essentially, focused on similar climate topics, like getting PFAS out of drinking water, like making sure that our soils are healthy and that we can continue to grow crops. In this case, I see on the exclusive side sort of more wide lines, really big picture, like let's talk about fossil fuel emissions and corporate greed and sort of global inequality and talking about the global south, and then bringing it down into a more localized messaging about protecting the land that we have here, and that sustainable living is just smart, and we have always, we always want to be good stewards of the land and water. This makes a lot of sense to me. Cold plunge capitalism, very funny term. I'm going to guess this is crypto bro stuff. Dude bro content podcasters, I guess, who, they value longevity, health, and financial success. And sustainability is a way to future-proof investments. They really want independence and performance. Okay, very interesting. Okay. The first one makes sense to me. Let's talk about economic success. Yes, these two things go hand in hand, making sure that we're resilient and making sure economies are sustainable. The second one's really funny. Again, it's not funny, but basically talking about testosterone levels and specific health impacts on those who are worried about testosterone levels. I didn't know this, but yeah, it seems like a point that could be, and I'm going to put maybe I'll put another source here to just look into that, but that makes sense to me. If people are worried about their health, I mean, we talk about in the ozone story that dealing with the ozone hole had to do a lot with the very real and immediate health risk. And then instead of talking about ESG, using financial language to talk about future-proofing assets. Okay, sure. Obviously, those who want to dismantle capitalism don't necessarily want to use this language, but yes, I could see that kind of language could work. And if you are a dude bro who speaks to audiences like this and for whom this might resonate, I'm very curious what you think about this. Tailgate patriot, faith, family, and freedom, and they want to hunt, fish, and have recreation. Okay. All right, some interesting headlines here. American football season is getting hotter. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Vegas, and that was definitely a problem even when I was a kid. Removing invasive plant species from your land. Yeah, there's some interesting things here. So, talking about investing in families and protecting what's ours as patriots. I don't know. I am kind of skeptical about this one, and I would love to hear from those who have maybe seen this working in real time. I don't know a lot of people who are in the tailgate patriot segment. So yeah, if you know in the chat, let me know if this works. DIY devotee. I want to do that actually. Self sufficiency, DIY solutions, cost savings, and want to stretch their dollar and fix things themselves, which is great. I think a lot of us are unfortunately going to have to do that soon. This one absolutely makes sense. This one's easy. I mean, being green saves money as well, and doing things like upgrading your house, making sure that you are getting the most energy efficient things for your home, wasting less, sort of environmentalism 101. So I think this audience is a no-brainer in my opinion. Okay, so we're out of the archetype section, and now they're talking about building trust through personal narratives, talking about lived experiences rather than data. Absolutely. In previous posts I've made on TikTok, we talk about how scientists sometimes can be seen as too cold and not human enough, and maybe that's not good for building trust. This makes sense. Storytelling is very human, and going back to this extreme weather survivors, they said that. Go outside into unexpected places like sporting events, county fairs, and they're talking about organizations and advising them to find new places to talk to people. That makes sense to me. I mean, I personally am interested in talking to people who are not exactly like me, and I think we have a lot to talk about that we have in common. Okay, lastly, yeah, and that's pretty much it. I hope that was interesting for you. I have not known what exactly will resonate with people here on YouTube, but I thought that would be a cool exercise to look at a presentation together that seems interesting. And as somebody who wants to improve climate media and climate narratives, I'm very curious about how we reach different audiences and what resonates with people. This was kind of an experiment. If you like this kind of video, let me know. If it was long or boring, also let me know. I personally believe there are way more people out there who believe in climate change than we think. And this presentation is kind of confirmation of that. And it really is a matter of the language we use, mutual respect, and finding values that align, which I think we have a lot more in common than we think. Like and subscribe if you want to, and keep coming back, and let me know what kind of content you want to see about climate. Thanks for watching.